These are devotions for people at a social distance. Yesterday, I was engaging in a Zoom conversation with some ministerial colleagues. The topic of our discussion was generosity, and I think a very important topic to discuss right now. I do feel, as we were all saying in that discussion, that generosity is a vital practice for all of us right now. We may not have the resources we normally have. We may not have the be able to be generous in the ways we have been in the past, but finding ways to be generous is absolutely essential. I think it's something that people need to do, because it's one of the ways in which we can make sense of where we can help, where we can make a difference at this time. So I'm all for generosity, and I probably will talk about generosity in one of these other devotions. But that conversation also left me somewhat dissatisfied because we were veering away from embracing any sort of consideration of dealing with these matters in a structural way, talking about how the structures of society are things that we can be involved in and influenced in. And what we're seeing in the midst of this COVID-19 pandemic is it is so much exposing the cracks, the systemic cracks in our society. And it's not just, and these cannot be addressed and cannot be tackled through the practice of individual generosity, as important as it is. You know, there are so many statistics I could cite, but one thing that's definitely struck me in the last little while is the news out of Chicago, where I understand that the numbers of people, the percentage of people deeply affected, their lives deeply changed by the COVID-19 pandemic, that it has struck people of color just wildly in a differential way, where 70% of the victims are people of color, far outstripping their representation in the general population. That is a huge issue, and that's a huge problem, and it's not something that can be attacked or addressed by individual action, because it's a systemic problem. It has a lot to do with the kind of housing that certain segments of society are pushed into, and how they cannot live uh, while practicing social distance. I know this is absolutely true. I feel this incredible privilege right now. And it's a very simple privilege, but it is a huge privilege that I get to enjoy because I live in a community where I can go outside and I can walk, and the to stay away from people, stay 2 meters away from people is very easy for me. There are people in our society right now who are living in places where that's simply not possible. They cannot step out their doors. They cannot leave because the space that is reserved for human living where they live is so limited. And part of this is partly because we give so much space to cars and we give no space to people. That's a systemic problem. It has to do with the kinds of jobs that people are pushed into when they come from poor backgrounds, from minority backgrounds, and they are given few other options. And they are the kind of jobs where they have very little job security, where they have low pay. But in this age of COVID-19, they are often still deemed to be essential workers and pushed into contact with the public in ways that endanger their health. These are systemic problems. We cannot attack them by individual generosity. And these are people who, they can't quit because they would not get, the employment benefits that people who are being laid off, and they are forced for low wages to continue to do their food delivery service, other things like that. This is a systemic issue. So the systemic cracks in our society are showing up, and we need to be willing to look beyond individual action. And I know that's hard, but it is so essential. I read this passage this morning. This is from James chapter 5, and I'll tell you, I would never ever speak in such ways today. I wouldn't dare. But this isn't me speaking. This is James. Come now, you rich people. Weep and wail for the miseries that are coming to you. Your riches have rotted and your clothes are moth-eaten. Your gold and silver have rusted, and their rust will be evidence against you, and it will eat your flesh like fire. You have laid up treasure for the last days. Listen, the wages of the laborers who mowed your fields, which you kept back by fraud, cry out. And the cries of the harvesters have reached the ears of the Lord of hosts. Now, again, I would never speak that way. I am obviously very sensitive to, I know rich people who care deeply about other people. But I think what James is talking about here is not individuals. He is talking about a structural issue. The world is so skewed in favor of certain groups of people and not in groups of other. If we cannot talk about the structural problems in our society, we are going to get nowhere. So as people of faith, we need to be willing to talk about these things. I was very heartened this morning. I read a tweet. This is from Senator Marty Deacon. She wrote this: COVID-19 has shown that our welfare system is not built to handle shocks such as what we see today. It is time we give some serious consideration to a minimum basic income. I've joined a number of my Senate of Canada colleagues calling on the government to take necessary steps towards this. And I know Marty Deacon, I know she's a woman of faith, but she's obviously very much a dedicated civil service, and she speaks truth. If we cannot look at the structural issues, the cracks in our structure in society are showing so much. We've got to find a way to talk about this. We've got to find a way to think differently about this. The cracks in the welfare system obviously is a huge issue, but that's just one of them. So yes, as people of faith, we need at this time very much to be willing to look beyond individual actions, individual generosity, as wonderful, as necessary as it is for our sakes and for everyone's sakes. We need to be willing to look at the systems, and the systems are cracking and creaking and falling apart under the stress of this situation. We as people of a faith have a role to speak to this. It's my devotion for today. That's where God is speaking to me anyways. Where is God speaking to you? Let's pray. Gracious God, thank you that we do have this ability. You grant us the ability to practice generosity. It is so helpful and meaningful at this time. Give us the courage and the grace to look beyond individual actions, to look at our structures and what's going on, and to think critically and creatively and outside of the box about where we go from here. Amen. God bless you.